And there's a lot of expectation for Europe to follow through. I think the European well's dry. I don't know how much more Europe can give to Ukraine without decisively impacting their own national security. So I think there's this Ukrainian engine that's been built, this engine of war, and the engine functions so long as it's fed, oil and gas. The oil, the lubrication, is the blood of the Ukrainian men that are being fed in there like a meat grinder. And there's still a considerable amount of oil that can be brought in to lubricate the engine. But the fuel that makes the cylinders fire is the weapons. The Ukrainian army has lost virtually every weapon it possessed at the beginning of this conflict. The only thing that keeps the Ukrainian army going is this new weaponry coming in from the West. And I do think that they're going to have an energy crisis pretty soon where there's just not going to be any more weapons to give them. Meanwhile, Russia, on the other hand, they've been fighting this war with one hand tied behind their back because of the limitations of the special military operation. NATO decided to up the ante by turning the Ukrainian army into a NATO army. That's what's there today. It's a NATO army. NATO equipment, NATO training, NATO intelligence, NATO communications, NATO everything to fight Russia. And Russia now has said, okay, if you want to change the game, we'll change the game too. It's no longer about a special military operation in Ukraine. It's about the defense of the motherland. There we are. Boom. Whoop, there it is. Now what are you going to do? Russia just doubled down, put all the chips on the table, and called NATO's bluff. NATO's got nothing to call. They don't have any chips left. And if they call, they go bankrupt. So I think, this is going to unfold on a pace that's dictated by Russia. And Russia's already committed to mobilization of 300,000 men. That means that Russia is going to allow these 300,000 men to be assembled, organized, and trained responsibly. There's no panic in Russia. You don't see Russia like Ukraine grabbing people and throwing them straight to the front line. The Russians are going to take time to get these 300,000 up to speed. And that means that they're not even going to be introduced until late December, early January. And then after that point, Russia will then begin the very bloody process of accomplishing every task set out by the SMO. Demilitarization, and because NATO has taken it upon itself to transform the totality of the Ukrainian military into a NATO military, demilitarization defined by Russia means getting rid of all NATO aspects. So the entire Ukrainian military will either have to be destroyed on the field of battle or surrendered and dismantled. Denazification. And again, I know we haven't talked about this too much. There's a real Nazi problem in Ukraine. It's a real Nazi problem. It's not a theoretical Nazi problem. It's not a peripheral Nazi problem. It's a real Nazi problem staring Europe in the face, and Europe is deciding, and the United States is deciding to ignore it. Russia's not ignoring it. Russia remembers what the Nazi ideology did to 27 million of its citizens. It never forgets. And so Russia is going to denazify Ukraine. Now, when this war first started, denazification could have been accomplished simply by having the current Ukrainian government change the constitution, which removes not only saying we want to be part of NATO, but it outlaws Stepan Bandera and the ideology of the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists. Outlaws it. It dismantles the monuments, bans the political parties, criminalizes this kind of stuff. That could have been done, and Ukraine could have survived. Today, as the Russian government has said, the Ukrainian government is a Nazi government today, which means denazification means the total eradication of the Ukrainian government. So anybody who doesn't understand that this conflict will not end until the Ukrainian military has been 100% destroyed and the Ukrainian government has been eliminated, then you don't know what this war is about. That's what's going to happen. Russia will accomplish this on its own timetable. Now, I believe that Russia can accomplish this with the forces allocated, but it will probably not be till midsummer, end of summer 2023 until this conflict ends. This conflict, if it's fought along those lines, will cost Ukraine 250,000 people because the gloves are coming off. The Russians aren't playing games anymore, and it's going to turn into real war. You're going to say, oh, well, Scott, it's a real war right now. No, it's not. What it is right now is a partial war, a war where Russia is not using all of its power. What's about to become is a real war. And Europe's about to wake up to what real war is about. maybe this will be a wake-up call to Europe too, realizing that the United States were promising you this notion of security through NATO. It was just a facade. Europe isn't secure at all. I don't think Europe has to worry about Russian overreach. Russia has no intention of moving into Poland. Russia has no intention of driving into Moldova or taking Romania. Russia has every intention into ensuring that Ukraine will never be a NATO nation, and that the Nazi regime, the Nazi ideology will be eradicated once and for all. I'm not sitting here saying that I support the Russian annexation of these territories. It's a very complicated geopolitical question and legal question. But I think NATO loses a lot of its its legitimacy by saying what happened in Kosovo is okay. Well, we can't let Russia do the same thing in Odessa. The United States. It was funny. Blinken was asked the question: what about the Golan Heights? Israel just annexed the Golan Heights. What's America's standing on that? And the answer was, well, the Golan Heights are very important for Israel's security, given the Syrian regime. Well, if that's what you're saying, then Russia's annexation of Novorossiya is very important, given Russia's security situation vis-a-vis NATO. But the people I feel sorry for the most are the Russian people of Ukraine. Why? People call them separatists. They're not separatists. There was a coup d'etat that took place in Ukraine, where the legitimate government of Ukraine was ousted by an American-backed coup d'etat. So the Russians who stood up in eastern Ukraine and said, no, we don't support these coup plotters, they're not separatists, they're actually legitimate patriots. They're the ones who say, no, we refuse to be governed by coup plotters. And then for 8 years, they had to suffer under incessant shelling. They killed thousands of their civilians, thousands of their men, while the world ignored it and supported a sham peace process. So I feel sorry for them. The next people I feel sorry for are the bulk of the Ukrainian people themselves. People who labored in impotent ignorance, I'll call it. They just pretended what was going on in the Donbass wasn't going on. They labored under this artifice of a good life, the pretense that everything was okay, that NATO was going to be their savior. The Ukraine that existed prior to February 24th will never exist again. And that's a tragedy for the Ukrainian people who viewed that as their nation and their homeland.